Hi, and welcome to the President's Forum podcast, where we discuss innovation in higher education. Today, we're going to explore the Employer-Student Compact. We'll talk about employers' role in funding higher education moving forward. We're joined by David Kafafian, who is the COO of Clasp and has immense experience in this topic. Hey, David, thanks for making time to join us today.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it.
Hey, we know that you have deep expertise in regulatory environment, that you worked on the AHEAD rulemaking committee. Can you just start us out with telling us a little bit about that committee experience for you and why President's Forum institutions should care about AHEAD?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And thank you again for having me. AHEAD was ultimately the Department of Education's rulemaking committee focused on the Workforce Pell and accountability provisions under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or HR 1. I'll call it OB3. To my mind, the real thrust of AHEAD, and frankly, the big thrust of OB3 collectively, was how do we push higher education and workforce and employers closer together to collaborate rather than to operate in their own individual silos. So, we had a week focused on Workforce Pell, short-term programs, how do students use Pell dollars for programs that are short but deliver real quality outcomes. And then the second week was around how do we, basically create accountability frameworks that limit access to the federal student aid program for programs that do not sufficiently get students into fields that they are earning more than, had they not gone to school. And, that was something that Congress set up for us. It was a really amazing opportunity, but this is the new regime. It is here. I don't think it's going to change. So, for your member institutions and their leadership, I think it's important to pay attention to what we did there, and we can dig into that because I think it's here and it's here to stay. And frankly, the American public on both sides of the aisle seem to like the idea that higher education is a on-ramp to careers. And that is the point of this. And so paying attention in that vein is key.
Yeah. Well, let's. I want to pick your brain on short-term Pell specifically, but I just want your overall theory on accountability in higher education. What does it look like now? What should it look like? And then, if I may, I'd like to ask you to apply that to short-term Pell in your experience and what that might look like. But interested on your big picture takeaways on accountability.
Yeah. So I think it's a monumental moment in the sense of, for the last 15 years, we've had a system that did not hold all of higher education accountable. And kudos to, frankly, President's Forum and other members. I think everybody did kind of raise their hands at some point and say, look, it shouldn't be just the gainful programs that are being held accountable. It should be everybody. The whole point is that the whole system is helping students to get the training and education they need so that they can become, valuable and productive members of society, and that they can achieve economic mobility ultimately. I think the frameworks that Congress set out as we move from kind of the gainful world to where we are today is one that said we don't care about comparing, cost or debt to earnings. What we really care about is just straight up earnings. Are these programs going to put students in a position to earn? And so I do think it's really important. Your member institutions are disproportionately schools offering really valuable programs at very low and reasonable prices.
Right.
But the reality is the second part of that does not matter any longer, not because of anything we did in the confines of a committee, because that's what Congress said. Congress said it is just an earnings test. Are you earning more 3 years post completion than you would have if you hadn't gone to that program? If it's a bachelor's degree, if you had just gone to high school. And so that's what's really been set up here for schools, and they should be paying close attention to running an audit of their programs to be aware that, there are many programs. It's only one way for humans to evaluate whether something's effective. There are plenty of things that are, not monetizable in society, but are highly valuable to us as people. Capitalism just doesn't, reward you the same. But it is really important that schools be paying attention to that in this moment, because it will change what programs they can offer, at what scale, where students are going to get the funding from, et cetera. As it relates to the last part of your question for Workforce Pell, there's a whole lot of accountability that's been built into Workforce Pell. You have 70% graduation rate, 70% placement rate, a value-added earnings test or something thereabouts. You have stackability. It is a web that schools are going to have to crawl through to make a program eligible. My instinct is that for Workforce Pell or short-term Pell programs to be valuable, employers are going to have to work with schools to say, hey, this is a program we find so valuable that we, the employer, are going to fund it. And we're gonna be the primary dollars through tuition assistance or 5250 for a while. And great, if in the future it becomes Workforce Pell eligible and there's some subsidization through that channel to amplify the impact of every dollar we, the employer community, are putting in, great. That I think is a workable path, and it maybe is exactly what Congress's intent was. But I don't think schools are going to be building, a program saying Workforce Pell is the panacea that funds all the
Yeah.
that would not work.
It'll be interesting to see how institutions deal with that accountability system, and it'll be some good lessons learned too for to apply it more generally. But I want to go back to one of the things that you said about accountability. I mean, essentially the takeaway is right now we measure earnings outcomes, and we need to be measuring value. We need to be measuring the cost of that education as compared to earning outcomes, right?
Absolutely. I very much agree with that. And that was a problem under the old framework, right? Debt to earnings is also not cost to earnings.
Yeah.
It's closer. But the difference between debt and cost is frankly the wealth of your clientele. I hate to say it so bluntly, but that's the truth, right?
Right.
Cost is $10,000. If you have a very poor, and that means they can get grant dollars, or very wealthy and they can cash pay, then debt might be zero.
Right.
And if you're serving a middle class student, they might need to borrow all 10,000 of that. So I think cost to earnings to me makes more sense. Again, Congress put what they did to the page, and I think it is progress that we have something that is now holistic,
right?
And it pushes universities closer to workforce, and it pushes students, frankly, to pay attention to what programs they're pursuing and how that will impact their careers. Great, but there's certainly improvements that can be
so
made.
There's improvement to be had. We know that the current system doesn't always, the funding is not perfect. We have a student pays and employer hires system right now. So this is where your experience at Clasp could be interesting to us. Tell us about the sustainability of that model. Is it sustainable? What needs to be done?
Yeah, the short answer is it is not sustainable, and certainly not sustainable if the goal is to kind of close the misallocation of what kinds of programs and roles and fields students are pursuing. What I mean by that is there are all kinds of roles in America that have more open seats than we have people searching for jobs who are trained and employed and are going through programs. And we have all kinds of roles that are the opposite, where we have way more people looking for a seat than there is an open one. Healthcare is a place that we spend tons of time in Clasp. We know that the demand for talent with an aging population and the supply for trained talent, certainly post-COVID and all the burnout and churn there, is really at an asymmetry, and it's at a crisis level. And so our view is that is an opportunity to solve two crises at once, right? A clinical workforce talent shortage and a student loan crisis. And what do we mean by that? We're not just trying to take from employers to give to students just because we feel good about it. We do feel good about it, to be clear. But it's solving an employer problem. The real employer problem is they're saying we need more people coming into these critical fields: surge techs, rad techs, respiratory therapy, physical therapy, CRNA, nursing, all of it. We need more people coming into these fields, and we need more of them staying. And so offering student loan repayment on the back end, and in substantial levels, $20,000, $30,000 a year in some instances, is an amazing signal for a student that's pursuing education to say, this is the kind of program I want to pursue, because clearly I will have a job at the end of it. And oh, by the way, that job will help me get out of debt in 2 or 3 years, not 10 or 20. And so I think that reallocates the risk away from the students. It allows them to pursue those fields with clear conscience. And it's actually ROI positive, to use your term. It's ROI positive to the employers, because it's a whole lot cheaper than offering sign-on bonuses or paying for travel nurses or agency talent.
That's an interesting aspect, because employers are still dealing with this right now, right? They're trying to figure out a way around it. And so to do that, they're doing things like bonuses.
Exactly. We are trying to grow the pie for both sides, right? Like we have not had success selling 50 of the largest health systems in America by telling them you will feel good by paying this much money into student loan repayment. We have been successful in saying to them, this is a more effective use of your dollars than the way you are doing it today. And similarly, turning to students and saying, this is a way to validate your ROI of the time and money that you're spending to pursue a higher education and start your career.
Right.
So we're trying to grow the ROI for both sides of this. And I think doing that is essential. There's only so many possible payers for education. There's students, there's taxpayers, there's employers, theoretically, maybe school. I don't know. Like, there's not an infinite list here. And we're just trying to bring one of the new ones in. And I think we've had a lot of success doing that.
Yeah, students, taxpayers is what most people think about. But at the President's Forum, we've long advocated for reform to Section 127. And you've got to have some thoughts on that. How do you think 127 should evolve right now to better allow employers to get into the funding business in higher education and students to be able to take advantage of that?
Absolutely. So, look, I'm thrilled that under OB3 that the $5,250 a year of tax exclusion for tuition assistance or student loan repayment from employers was made permanent. I'm thrilled that it was inflation adjusted. But call a spade. That number, 5,250, has been there for 45 years, 43 years, something like that. If you inflation adjusted it to today, it'd be something like $16,000 to $18,000. So there is a massive move that we need to make as far as adjusting what that level is. Frankly, I would love to see us remove it. I'll tell you why. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. We have students that come to us and say, I know that my employer is paying $20,000 a year towards my student loans, but I can't afford to have my loans prepaid that quickly because I need the extra $152 a month that is currently being withheld in extra taxes for me to get that excessive benefit. And we forget it, right? Like, we're in very privileged positions. We think, obviously, your employer's trying to hand you $20,000. Sure, only $5,250 is tax excluded, but whatever. It's still better for you to pay tax on the last 14 and change. And the answer is no. In many instances, students will end up saying, I need to turn down this amazing financial benefit because I need the cash flow now. And that's a loss to society when that happens. Look, it's allowing the foregone tax revenue associated with increasing or removing that cap is a whole lot cheaper, to my mind, than the cohort default rates and the erosion of what the actual federal student loan repayments look like when the students have to pay it out of pocket themselves, than the costs for loan forgiveness on the back end should something like that. Like,
absolutely.
There is a cost no matter what, and this is at least an incentive aligned cost that maps to something that I think both sides of the aisle should be on board with.
That's wild experience to share. I mean, just the fact that can happen. I would never have thought about that if you hadn't actually experienced that. That's pretty significant. Yeah. Well, okay. So our audience, including higher ed presidents, very interested in insights that you can provide on these issues. But what's your biggest takeaway for our leaders? What would you tell them about how they can deepen the employer investment in education?
Yeah, I think the first thing to note is employers are not used to being tightly in tune with what higher education policy is. Historically, employers have not had to pay attention to what the Department of Education was doing. This is a new moment that they are being pulled in. They've got a seat at the table. That I was a negotiator on behalf of employers and business on the ed committee. But school presidents will have to do some of the legwork to bring those employers to the table and make them aware that they do have a voice and that you do want their feedback. You do want their data. You do want to understand what certifications they need, what skill sets they're looking for, what geographies they're serving with that, and where they see the puck going in 3 years, right? Because that's ultimately what the students are going to be ready. So I think that's just kind of like at a very meta level, the first thing I'd say. The other thing I would say is, ROI is going to be the 3 letters that students and the public hear for a long time to come. I think that is the new normal. I'm thrilled about that. I think it's a great outcome. The schools that can lean into speaking ROI language, the way that we do at Clasp, to employers to think about what their ROI is on the dollars you're asking them to spend, not why it's just in their social best interest, but why it's in their financial best interest. And then separately, the schools that can make it hyper visible to their students. What is the ROI of the programs that we are offering to you? What are the pathways that we are giving? How does it look for past cohorts? And how can we improve what your ROI is by, maybe it's like a short-term like group project program that is collaborative with an employer. Maybe it's a formal co-op program. Maybe like these kinds of, I don't want to call them interventions, these kinds of programs that can be intermediated within a given academic course so that the students are getting academic learning and workforce learning so that it can boost their own ROI, I think is really key. Because the schools that can lean into that, I think will be very differentiated as we look to the next 15 years of higher ed.
Right. Well, David, hey, we appreciate you spending the time with us today. talk through areas where you have really deep expertise. So thanks for the ahead thinking, and as well as the perspective from Clasp on employer engagement in this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Wes. Really appreciate you having me.